start our next session, and it's going to be about book reading and technology. And the issue of technology was mentioned in this. Sorry. Yeah. So our session is going to be about book reading and technology. And the issue of technology was mentioned in our workshop several times, and I think now in this session we are going to discuss it very deeply. And we have three presenters: Professor Adriana Bass from Leiden University and Professor Susan Newman from NYU, and myself, Professor Ofra Korat from Bar-Ilan University. I think that after being here together for the last 2 days, I don't have to introduce to you again Susan Newman and Adriana Bass. I can say that for myself, they were really leaders in terms of learning about literacy, early literacy, and I think both of them put a big impact on our knowledge today about early literacy. And it goes beyond that, because both of them also researching and making their effects on the new issue of multimedia technology and book reading. And in this session, we are going to discuss it, and I'm very, very glad to have them here with us. So the first speaker will be Adriana Bass, please.
Thank you, Ofra, for your kind words. I'm a bit nervous because I have to be quick, and I can't speak so quick in English. No. I want to talk about storybook apps, and maybe it would be better to say, but that's not such a nice phrase, technology-enhanced storybooks. Because apps are connected to a specific device, and the research so far is not. Children in the Netherlands, I don't know the numbers for Israel, but children in the Netherlands are more and more playing with these devices. From 3 to 3.5 years on, they spend a lot of time with tablets, especially since tablets came on the market. Children started to spend more and more time with this, and they even say, but I don't know the numbers exactly, but that it goes at the expense of time spent on book reading. And you notice it a little bit because kids are so happy to do these kinds of things that it's sometimes difficult to start reading to them. Children may often play games. We don't know exactly what they do on these devices, but they play games. And I wish that they would spend more time on storybooks on these devices. So I want to talk a little bit about these books, these technology-enhanced books. And I have a few topics that I want to discuss. First of all, what are these technology-enhanced storybooks? What is the additional? What is additional in it? There are storybooks, and mostly they are based on existing stories. But what is additional? I want to talk a little bit about the efficacy of these additions to these books. And then I would like to raise a question which people always makes very mad. So I'm a bit afraid. But this is the question: is it as good as interactive storybook reading? So when children interact with these books on on a device, is that as effective as parent-child storybook reading? I would like to raise the question, who benefits more or most from technology-enhanced books? I want to start with a few examples, and first with what we have called multimedia. Of course, storybooks are also multimedia because they have pictures in it. There is verbal and there is non-verbal information. But the multimedia are more expanded in these electronic books. And I want to show an example. This is one of the books that we used in our research. It's, maybe you know it, it's the book about little kangaroo. And it's a story about this little kangaroo that wants to go out of the mother's pouch. And she makes all kinds of attempts to get her out. And this is the last page. They meet this little guy, and she notices he has the same snout, same ears, same legs, same tail. And then this little guy asks, "Do you come with me?" And then she goes. And that's the ending of the story. You can see in the animated version that it makes a more explicit connection between the text and what you see, the non-verbal information. You see that it zooms in on elements and it shows more. So the story is really dramatized in it. So I can show you. I hope it works.
Kleine kangoeroe zag meteen dat hij op haar leek. Hij had dezelfde snoet, dezelfde oren, dezelfde springpoten en een stevige staart zoals zij. Kom je mee? Vroeg hij. Ja, zei kleine kangoeroe, als jij me net zo leert springen. En opeens sprong ze zomaar uit mama's buidel.
Ja. Well, here I have another example. It's a book of this bear who was in love with the butterfly. And in this scene, he wants to tell Butterfly what he feels for her. And then he becomes very shy and starts to stumble over his words. And you see that the connection between text and non-verbal information is more clear in this.
Beer wil graag vertellen wat hij voor haar voelt, maar hij is verlegen en struikelt over zijn woorden.
So that's the idea of the multimedia, and making a very clear connection between the picture and even adding elements like the music and the sounds. You heard the bear mumbling. It was incomprehensible what he said. Another element in these books is the interactivity. So they added features that made the books interactive. But there are various kinds of interactivity. I will show you one example of the same scene you just saw. In that book, they had built in questions about difficult words. And so you see in the scene that a little creature that appears asks, where is bear shy? And then there appear 3 pictures. And the child has to choose the one where the bear is shy. Here I go.
Maar hij is verlegen en struikelt over zijn woorden. Tijd voor een vraag. Let op.
Waar is Beer verlegen?
So where is Beer shy? And then this has become the mouse, so the child clicks on that picture. So this is one, what you could say with a vocabulary. Let's skip this one. I want to show the one that Bill mentioned as a very negative example of interactivity. So it's what many books do, and maybe 80 or 90% of the books have this, that you can click on elements of the picture, and something happens, mostly something surprising, and well, that's also what they do here, but it has nothing to do with the story.
Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were
No. This is the greatest one. Here you can move your device, you see, and they go up and down. Yeah. Okay. So there are quite a few interactive features. Some make sense to some extent because they ask questions about the story or the words. There can be games. I don't have an example of that. And there are those hotspots, as you just saw. But most often they're not related to the story content. Which I think, or which we thought is dangerous, because in fact children are task switching while they are reading the book. And they, on the one hand, they have to comprehend the story, and they are playing with the games. So they're doing 2 things at the same time. And they have, or not at the same time, you have to switch all the time from one task to the other. And this can easily lead to cognitive overload. And your brain cannot do all these things and keep track on what you did with one thing and doing the other thing. So what we did recently was a meta-analysis in which we collected all the experiments, because they are all experiments, that compared a situation in which a child reads a book on the computer, a storybook on the computer. And so in none of the study, an adult was involved. So the child reads on his or her own the story on the computer. And there is the oral text, of course, and there are some additional features. Some technology so the kind of features I just showed. And this situation is compared with a condition in which a child is read a storybook by a parent. That's very often the case. There are also studies in which there is no parent available, but the child hears the story. There is a voice that tells the story, and the child sees the static pictures. What did we find? First of all, we looked in particular at comprehension. So we looked at cognitive effects, so at comprehension and vocabulary. Here we looked at comprehension. We had 3 kinds of electronic books in the experimental conditions. So we had multimedia only, so like in Little Kangaroo. We had books with multimedia and interactivity, so some game or a dictionary or something where they could interact. And we had interactivity alone. And what you see here is that when you have multimedia only, you compare it with book reading, you get a strong additional effect of the multimedia. And it's really strong. It's almost 0.4 standard deviation, which is a lot. Because you have to think this is not the effect of the book, but the additional effect. It's in addition to reading the book, because in the control condition they do the same. So it's an additional effect. And you see that interactive elements tend to have a negative effect. Was not significant here, but they tend to have a negative effect, even if it's combined with multimedia. So I think this interactivity is distracting.
You explain that middle thing.
This?
What do you mean by interactive? Is that reading? Is that book reading?
No. I mean, I talk about interactivity, and then I talk about these hotspots, or this dictionary, or a game. And that's interactivity when that's included in the book. So in the books that had these multimedia, so these animated pictures and sound music, with interactivity, you have a negative effect, in fact. So it's this interactivity. It looks like it's more it's attractive to children. They love those books, but it's at the same time it's distracting. How about vocabulary? We also looked at vocabulary in these. Well, in all we had 43 studies and some more effect sizes. You see, for multimedia only also have a positive effect on vocabulary learning. So children learn more words when they have these animated pictures. You see a positive effect when there is interactivity, but it's not significant, and it's a very small positive effect. But it's more positive than for the comprehension. I think that has to do because there are many dictionaries included, and they may have an effect on story comprehension. We didn't find enough studies for interactivity alone. We had, as I told before, we had 2 kinds of comparison conditions. In, let's say about half of the studies had a parent interacting with the child in the control condition, in the comparison condition. And in about half of the study, the child was alone, heard the story read from a computer or some audio device, and saw the still images on the screen. So the child could look at the pictures at the same time, or had the book in front of him or her. So there were these 2 conditions, these 2 control conditions. And we thought, well, if parents are as effective as the multimedia shouldn't have an additional effect in the set of studies that has these parent-child interactions in the control condition. But if the parent is not well, if in the other condition where there is no parent, we should have a positive effect of the multimedia. And so we compared the situation with a parent in the control condition and without a parent. So it's a kind of way to see how comparable the multimedia are to what the parents do. And this is what we found. The dark piles are the conditions in which there was no adult in the control condition. So you see there we had a strong effect of the multimedia. So without an adult, the multimedia had an additional effect on the book reading. But when there was an adult, the multimedia didn't have an additional effect. So that would mean that when there is an adult that does about the same as what the multimedia are doing. So it has about the same effect.
Adult with multimedia together? That's adult and parent?
No, you're mixing up. It's an adult that is in the control condition, and it can be with the print book, for instance. And mostly it was with a print book that an adult was present. So there was an adult. So what does the adult do? The adult points at pictures. The adult comments at the pictures. And so it helps the child to look at the right places in the picture and to connect the language to the details in the pictures. And in the multimedia do in fact the same. They also guide the child in looking at the picture and seeing those elements that show, that non-verbally show what the language is telling. We also asked whether who is most benefiting, 5 minutes? Okay. Who is most benefiting from those books? And we made 2 groups. We could only make 2 groups. But in one group were disadvantaged children, so let's say low SES children, immigrant children, or well, all children who had problems with understanding the language, were lagging behind in the language. And we looked at the effect in that group and compared the effects to the group that is non-disadvantaged. And as you see, these books have a very strong additional, in particular the multimedia, have a very strong additional effect. It's almost 0.7 additional effect to storybook reading. So they really add something, but in particular in the group of children who is poor in language, who has problems with understanding the language. Makes sense, of course, because these children have problems to follow the language, the text that you read to them. So they need non-verbal support to understand the text. And so when you provide more non-verbal support, like in these multimedia conditions, they do a lot better. They understand more of the story. 1 minute? Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I had one study that I want to talk about, but I need 5 minutes. Okay, I made a deal. So recently we did a study throughout the country, in the first year that we did the study, we included 90 schools. And in the second year, we even have 125. So yeah, we have lots of schools. And we selected at these schools children who were among the lowest scoring on a standardized literacy test for kindergarten. So the lowest 25%. So the children who are at risk. And we did a book reading program, a program on the computer with the books, with the multimedia, with these children. And so in every classroom we had at least one child who did this book reading program, and we had a control child. We also looked at differential effects. We took from the literature, in fact, that some children are more susceptible to these kinds of interventions. They are more responding to special interventions than other children. And I won't go too much into the marker we used in this case to make a distinction between susceptible and not susceptible children. But we used a genetic marker. We used a gene that is related to dopamine. And dopamine production is very important for being attentive, being able to stay motivated, and continue to stay motivated. About 40% of the children is carrier of a gene that makes you vulnerable, that makes you susceptible. All these children are easily distracted and have a problem to stay attentive for a longer time. So we had these two conditions. We had the living books conditions in which they saw the multimedia book, and we had a control program in which they played a hide and seek game during the same time. Children did the program twice a week during 15 minutes, and they were all alone at the computer, and they did it for 2 months. What did we see? Well, we found a very strong effect of this susceptibility. And in fact, we found only effects in the susceptible group. As you see here, the children, the susceptible children, so it's about 40% of our group, who didn't get living books, were scoring lowest on this literacy, this standardized literacy test. Children who were, when these children received living books, they were best. They outperformed the rest of the children. And in the other group, this what we called here the low susceptible group, there was no effect at all. So it didn't make a difference whether they were in the control condition or in the book reading condition. Here I summarized it. When you look overall at the effect of living books, there's no effect. 0.10, that's nothing. But when you look in the high susceptible group, so these 40% of children, you see an effect size of 0.56. So then children do really a lot better. And in the low susceptible group, it's around 0. So, okay, Ofra, I skipped the summary. That was it.